It's been 5 years now, and I still get angry at my ex-husband just remembering it and wanting to do something about it. I need to write this down here to put my mind at ease. I married my husband, who is 3 years older than me, when I was in my 20s. I met my husband at the workplace where we both worked. As a new graduate, my husband was my trainer, so he taught me things I didn't understand, and we went out to eat together, and we became attracted to each other, and by the time I was in my second year at work, we started dating. My husband wasn't exactly handsome. He was kind to new graduates, including me, and I was attracted to my husband's personality and became more and more infatuated with him. Then, after about 6 months of dating, my husband proposed to me, and I felt like I was in heaven. Since we had already grown up and gotten married, my parents and in-laws took the stance that if two people wanted to get married, it was up to them. After we decided to get married, things like choosing a wedding venue and the date went very smoothly, and we were able to have a happy ceremony blessed by our family and coworkers. Looking back, I think this was the happiest time of my life. Having married in my 20s, I naturally expected to have children right away, but during our first year of marriage, at the age of 24, we were unable to have children. Half a year after I turned 26, I knocked on the door of a fertility clinic, and it took 3 years of treatment to find out that my husband was infertile. By the time I was finally able to conceive a daughter, I was 29 years old, but I was so happy when I was able to enter a stable period. Thus, I gave birth to my daughter before I was 30 years old. She was so cute that she was the apple of my eye, partly because she was the result of our hard work. I quit my job in the middle of fertility treatment, so I became a full-time housewife. My husband's earnings alone were a little too modest, so I decided to go out to work some weekends and holidays when he was home, and at midnight on weeknights. I was a little nervous about leaving my daughter at home, but my husband, like me, thought she would be fine, saying, "Dakota is really cute." I thought it would be all right, and when my daughter was in the upper grades of elementary school and could stay at home, I planned to find a daytime job. Then, when my daughter grew up and became a third grader, the incident happened. It was the day of an elementary school field trip, and I had gotten up early in the morning to prepare her lunch. Then my daughter came to me and said, "Fried chicken today, huh?" I wanted to eat Mommy's croquette today. Because I like your croquette the best. My daughter had never said that she did or didn't want to eat something, so I felt a little uncomfortable. But when I was making her lunch without worrying about it, she said to me one more time, "I want to eat your croquette." I wondered if she had promised to share them with her friend, but we didn't have the ingredients in the fridge. "Sorry, Dakota. I can't make croquettes because I don't have potatoes." She looked a little disappointed and said, "I see. But I love Mommy's fried chicken too, so I'll be fine," and ran away. If I had known at this moment that my daughter would disappear after her field trip, I would have made croquettes for her even if I had to run to a grocery store far away. Time went by and it was time for my daughter to go on her field trip. She took her lunch box and water bottle and said, "Okay, Mom, I'm off. I love you," and she called out to me and left for school. I had no idea that I would not see my favorite daughter after this. While she was out at school, I was at home doing laundry and studying for my certification because I was planning to get a day job when she was in the 5th grade or so. I looked at the clock and saw that it was already past noon, and I wondered if my daughter had eaten her lunch. I wondered if she was having a bad day because of croquette. It must have been after 1 p.m. I suddenly received a call from the school. When I picked up the phone, my daughter's homeroom teacher said in a very impatient tone, "Oh, is Dakota back there?" She asked. Of course, my daughter was still on her field trip. Hearing the teacher's words, I immediately understood what she meant and almost fell to the floor, my face turning pale. "What do you mean? Dakota is not at home. Isn't she on a field trip now?" I asked, and the teacher replied in an apologetic voice, "Yes, that's it. Dakota disappeared somewhere during recess after lunchtime. The staff and students are searching for her right now. We can't find her at all. We thought she might have gone back home." He told me what was going on. From that point on, I panicked and asked, why would Dakota disappear during a field trip? Why didn't the teachers watch her? After taking it out on her homeroom teacher, I hurriedly changed my clothes and headed for a large park on the edge of the city where my daughter had said she would go on a field trip, and where we could also go camping. And then I met up with the teachers. The homeroom teacher and the head of the school year were sweating profusely and their faces were pale, despite the cool weather, as they frantically searched for my daughter. And so we searched hard for our daughter, but she was not in the park or at the campground. Not only was my daughter gone, but her backpack and other things she had taken with her were gone, and when we asked her friends, they said they had not seen her. I asked the girl my daughter was closest to and she said she didn't know where she was, and I just slumped there, not knowing what to do anymore. Then the teachers called the police and I called my husband. A massive search was conducted, but still no one could find my daughter. It was long past field trip time, and not only the teachers but also the children searched for my daughter, but still they could not find my daughter, who is in the 3rd grade. The teachers at the school said, "We are so sorry. Even though it was free time, it was our responsibility. I am so sorry." They apologized again and again. At first I was angry at the homeroom teacher. One of the mothers from the same school told me, "I heard that the homeroom teacher goes to that park every day to look for Dakota. Not only in the park, but also around the park on her bicycle, looking for her." I understand your resentment toward your homeroom teacher, but I thought you should know this, and once I learned that her homeroom teacher was looking for my daughter as desperately as I was, I couldn't blame the teacher. A month or 2 later, I still couldn't find my daughter, but I went looking for her every day, and apparently her homeroom teacher also searched the town for her, even after the school year had changed and my daughter's classmates had entered the 4th grade. Still, my daughter was not found. I know my relatives and Mom's friends probably thought in their hearts that my daughter had passed away. I thought she was still alive and somewhere out there. I could not give up hope that I would see her again someday. Incidentally, it was around this time that things started to fall apart between me and my husband. When he heard that our daughter had disappeared, he came home early from work and searched for her with me. I think it was about a month after my daughter disappeared. I went to look for my daughter as usual, and when I came back late, he said, "How long are you going to do that? Look, you've had fertility treatment and you still have some frozen eggs, right? If you put those back in your stomach, you can get pregnant 2 or 3 more times, so you don't have to be that concerned about your daughter. Besides, I'm sure Dakota will." He said, "Besides, I'm sure Dakota will." At first I did not understand what my husband was saying to me. If we had another child, it would not be Dakota. I had nothing but distrust for my husband to say such words to me when he did not know how our daughter was doing. So I said to him, "How can I think about the next child now? Dakota is Dakota." I continued to look for my daughter, but I couldn't find her that day either. My relationship with my husband continued to be strained, and I thought that even if I found my daughter, I might not be able to stay with him, so I started to look for a job. If I had to live with my daughter, I couldn't do it with a part-time job, so I looked for a full-time job, but this was not easy. Having a blank, I first became a contract worker and then managed to get a full-time job. Then, thinking only of reuniting with my daughter, I gave part of the salary I earned from my full-time job to my parents to save up so that my husband would not find it. I told my husband that I would remain a contract employee. Thus, I worked as a full-time employee from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., and then searched for my daughter. I lived like that for many years. I thought about divorcing my husband, but in the midst of my busy schedule, his presence was like air. I never came home, but went back to my parents' house after work, and since we were living separately, divorce didn't matter anymore. Then one day, it was my daughter's birthday, 13 years after her disappearance. I thought it would not be a good idea to continue my relationship with my husband, so I came home for the first time in a long time and said to him, "You know, I've been separated from you for many years now. I had no idea how you felt after our daughter's disappearance. Dakota was gone and you only looked for her for the first few days. You suggested that I should have a new baby instead of Dakota. We can't do this anymore. Let's break up." I was pressing him for a divorce. Then my husband opened his mouth and said something outrageous to me. "I see. You really love Dakota that much. Well, it's kind of my fault that Dakota left me." At first I didn't understand what my husband was saying. The next moment, I grabbed my husband by the shoulders and said, "What are you talking about? Do you know anything about Dakota's disappearance? Hey, what do you mean? Tell me. Talk to me." I was yelling at him. I still get angry when I recall what my husband said after that. It seems that from the time my daughter started elementary school, when I was away from home on weekends, holidays, and weekday evenings, my husband demanded that my own daughter do things that she wasn't supposed to do. Of course, my daughter didn't like it, but my husband told her, "If this gets out, your mom will hate me too." He told me that he had kept his daughter in the dark about it. It wasn't like I was asking for much. She probably got tired of it and ran away. There's no way a third grader can survive out in the world on her own, right? Well, by now. Hearing that much, I blew off my husband and ran outside. My daughter had been kidnapped, or maybe she was involved in some kind of incident. I thought about that, but I had no idea that she had left home because her own father saw her as a sexual object and she didn't want that. Because my husband kept her from talking about it, she couldn't talk to me about it. How painful it must have been for her. I was so sad and frustrated that I couldn't see what was going on in front of me. As I was running outside, I suddenly found myself standing in front of the house of my daughter's closest friend. When my daughter disappeared, she told me she didn't know where she was, but I thought, maybe. But I just stood there, not daring to press the intercom at home. Then I heard a voice say, "Dakota's mother." I heard a voice and turned around to see a young woman in her 20s standing there. I immediately recognized her as Abigail, because she looked like she used to be, and I suppressed my excitement and asked her, "Well, if you know, I'd like you to tell me. Maybe you know where Dakota is." Actually, I wasn't sure if I should tell her the truth, but I told her what my husband had told me. Then Abigail said, "You also found out the truth." As a matter of fact. And started talking. After all, Abigail knew about my daughter. But my daughter, if she had not lived, then I would have. I felt as if I wanted to hear Abigail's words, but I also did not want to hear them. I was listening to her story, praying for my daughter to be alive. I knew that my daughter could not stand my husband's actions and was planning to leave the house using a field trip as a chance. I think she wanted me to have croquettes because she wanted to have her favorite meal for one last time. So during the field trip, my daughter ran away, telling only Abigail about the situation. Abigail told her homeroom teacher, Dakota was over there just now. So the teacher had to look in the opposite direction from where my daughter had gone. But after hearing what happened, I couldn't blame Abigail. For a while after that, Abigail could not get in touch with my daughter and thought it would be better to tell the teacher. She was worried that she should tell me and my husband. Then, about a year after my daughter's disappearance, Abigail received a letter from my daughter. My daughter had run away from the park that day and was approached by an elderly couple at a campground in the back of the park, who had aged without children. When the couple learned of her situation, they decided to shelter her and raise her as they had. Well, if you call it kidnapping in a sense, it is. They were very kind and raised my daughter until she reached adulthood. As for school, it seems that even though she was unregistered and without a certificate of residence, she could still enroll in school if she worked hard on the application process, and the elderly couple even allowed her to attend school in one way or another. She is now over 70 years old, and my daughter told me that she was not sure if she should show up, but now she is working outside the home to help the old couple who took care of her, and is devotedly taking care of them while working outside the home. I told Abigail what happened, but she said, if I told my mom the truth, she might hurt me, saying that she couldn't protect me when I was little. I don't think I would be able to stand it if my mother looked at me like I was dirty when she found out that I had such a thing with my father. But I want to eat Mom's croquettes again. She told her when they secretly met together just around the time of their coming-of-age ceremony. I told Abigail that I would not be hurt by her words and that I really wanted to see my daughter. Then Abigail told my daughter about the situation and I was finally able to meet her. My daughter, whom I hadn't seen in a long time, looked very embarrassed. I was so happy that my daughter was still alive that I couldn't find any words and just cried. Then my daughter said, "Mom, I'm sorry I left without telling you. I really wanted to escape from my father. I just couldn't talk to my mom about it. I wish I could have told you sooner, but I couldn't leave my mother and father who raised me." She confided in me. I had no intention of accusing the elderly couple who had devoted themselves to my daughter of kidnapping her, nor did I want to ask them to give her back to me now. After expressing these feelings to my daughter, I asked her, "If you want, why don't you come over for croquettes sometime?" I asked her. She replied, "Yes, of course. Oh, and curry and fried chicken." And maybe some stir-fried meat and vegetables? I love all of your cooking. She agreed. Later, I divorced my husband and started living alone near my parents' house. And my daughters started coming over to my house for dinner from time to time. I was very happy that my daughter was still alive, despite the 13-year gap, and she gradually began to tell me stories about her life as a student. The elderly couple who sheltered my daughter really cared for her, and I thanked them once with my daughter, but they were too old and had dementia, so we didn't have a chance to talk for too long. Also, in order to take a little revenge on my husband, I confided in a former coworker about the way he treated my daughter. I heard that he was fired from the company before retirement, but I honestly don't think I can forgive my ex-husband for something as trivial as that. I know you might think I'm crazy for writing this, but even now, if I could kill my ex-husband, I would. But I feel a little better now that I can write it here. Thank you for reading this story about a helpless mother who failed to recognize my daughter's abnormality.